14 millimeter. It's right in the way, isn't it? Huh. Right in the way. I'll get the bottom at least. Oh, these are rusted. These are not the same as the other side. I did the other side already. These look like maybe they're 13s or 12s. That's a good start. Always when you see it's different from one side to the other. 12? Or just they rusted to nothing. Now they look like they're 12s. Different than the other side. I don't know if this one of these calipers has been replaced. Obviously somebody's been in here. It's different than the other side. Let me get a hammer. Broke one loose. Bottom one. Same. Alright. Before we get them doing nuts on them too much, I want to push this piston in a little bit. I'll stick a screwdriver between the pad and the rotor. This side's better than the other side. The other side was torn up pretty good. Get a screwdriver in there, kind of pry out on the caliper so the caliper goes this way. And I'm not going to do it all the way. I just want enough so it's loose on there, so I don't have a problem getting it off. Okay. Just finished taking this off. It's interesting. The other side, this line was not in the way. Like, watch it. You'll trap your wrench in there if you're not careful. Was not in the way of that at all. Really surprised. A little different here. I don't know why, but it is different for sure. I'm just going to pivot that up. That lets me clear that. I should be able to just slide this out now. Just slide it out. I'm not going to bother with it. Just going to break my boot loose. And I had one of the slides on the other side had no grease left in it at all. This one's not letting go too easily. I will say that. Let's see if we can get a little bit of careful though. If you do this, you don't want to tear the boot. I want it to let go. Let go. It's got a lot of rust, so I'll have to replace the boot. You got to be real careful if you do this. I say that, and it's usually right before I ruin it. Wow, boot's staying on there. Okay, just take it off like that. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to undo this. I said I'm leaving it like that, but I'm not. I'm going to undo this. There are some grease in here. It needs to be re-greased though. These pins are the same top and bottom on this car. So now I'll just leave that bolt there. I don't know why it's different than the other side. But it is, whatever reason. Move my light here. Lay that up on top, out of the way. You can see this, I left this piston out a little bit from the boot. Just out a little bit. That way it makes it easier to clean this surface without worrying about damaging the boot. There's my one pin. I'll get that boot out when I get that off from there. Should be loose now. No, it's not loose. Two mounting bolts mount the caliper. Should be 17 millimeter. I'm guessing they will be because I doubt they changed the mounting bracket for it, but who knows? Who knows what's going on? Let's get this in a position where I can knock it loose here, hopefully. Got my own light in my way. Oh, is it tight? Oh, they are real tight. Alright, try a different angle. Get them down here so I can get a better shot at it. That one's pretty tight. Probably corrosion more than anything. Get the bottom one. Same thing. Nothing exciting. There it goes. Just kind of working back and forth. Another ratcheting wrench. Lost my shoe. Shoe back on. And the same deal. Rotor off. Done with that. These pads are actually worn. Even the other side was not because I had a bad slide, and one of the pins was no grease in it. You can see these pads are. Look at that. They're locked up, so they're not doing too well either. You should move freely, in the bracket, and these are locked up. Wow, big time locked up. Whew. Beautiful. I don't even want to come out. They're so locked up in there. Wow. Alright, there's one. So they're worn. They were worn okay. Not great, but okay. Better than the other side, like I said. We'll knock this one out of here. Well, you see how hard that is and what doesn't want to move? It's not going to work real well. They should move freely in there. And they're obviously locked up, and these are pretty rusty. Hopefully you can see that in here. See if I can get that a little better for you. In there, that hardware just broke in half. It literally just busted off. It's so rusted in there. And that's what happens. Rust gets behind this hardware. Actually, this is beautiful. This is the wrong hardware. So look at this end. So hopefully you can see this. Let me get you in a better position here. Right here. That should be as wide as the base. It stops right here. You can see. Hopefully you can see. I got the light right in your face, but right down there, looking at that. Right. Let me change my light here. It's interesting what you find sometimes. Right there. See it bent over in there? That's supposed to be all the way out to the edge here. This is the wrong hardware. Actually, it's not the wrong hardware. It's different side to side on these. This is wider and this is narrower. This one actually belongs on this end. They put them in wrong. Whoever did them put it in wrong. So that's a thing of beauty. That's what you get. So that wasn't doing much at all. That's why that nub there that's supposed to be over the edge of this was in the middle of the flat. So it's pushing up on the end of the tab on the pad. Of course it's not going to work. Man, oh man. Stuff you find sometimes. Just either somebody doesn't know or doesn't care. This side's particularly rusty. I'll get in here, I'll spray this down, we'll clean it all in here. I'm going to clean the face of this hub. We're going to sand that. You can use Scotch-Brite, emery cloth. You just want to take the corrosion off, especially excuse me, especially around the flange. That's where they tend to hang up. And we're just going to clean that up, and then I'll put some high temp grease, thin coat of high temp grease on this, keep the rotor from sticking to it. These are fully coated rotors. I switched to use fully coated rotors right here because we have a lot of corrosion. So I've got the one pin out. This pin's loose, which is good. Let me pull it out. This one needs a new boot. This one's got a hole in the boot right there in the middle. I don't know if you can see it or not, but right in the middle of that boot there's a hole. And of course, light's terrible. Not doing real well with my lighting here. Trying not to blind you while I show it to you. Might help. Right here in the middle of this boot. See the hole? I got to get a new kit for it. So we'll have to do that. And they do not want to let go. Look how far that is. Oh. So this one has grease in it at least. The other one, ow, that hurt. Virtually nothing left. It's what's left in there is kind of dried up and it's no good. The other side was worse, so these weren't done very well. We're going to have to get a new boot kit for this. I'll go down in here, spray this out with brake clean. They don't look rusty inside, so if they're rusty, you can take a drill bit that's about the same size, put it in there, and then maybe a brass brush, round brush, stick it in there, clean it out real good. These aren't rusty, so I'll just clean it out with brake clean before we put it back together. Can't put it back together anyway, so I have to get a boot kit for it. I'll take this over the wire wheel. First, you want to get all this corrosion out of here where the hardware sits, right in here. So I'm going to file that. Don't want to take the metal off, just want to take the corrosion off of that. Both ends, and then I'll go to the wire wheel and clean it up, finish cleaning it up. And we'll re-grease it and put the new hardware on there, put it on there correctly. It wasn't on there correctly before. And then we'll put it back together. Let me get my, same thing here. So this up in here, let me see if you can see it. You can see it. I'm going to clean the face of this and get the rust off of it, the corrosion off of it. Clean the back of these tabs. And I'm going to grease the back of these tabs and grease the face of this with the brake grease. All that does is keep corrosion from getting in there and pushing the pads around so they don't work right. So we'll do that as well. Let me get my, I think we'll do the face of this hub first. So I've got a Rolex disc. You can use a cookie wheel, some emery cloth, and Scotch-Brite. I use the emery cloth first around the hub here, around the flange. You see where there used to be a screw. There's 2 screws that hold the front of this rotor on from the factory. They're broken off. They break off all the time. You don't really need them if you take them off one time. Once you get them off, they're just there for the factory when they put it together. But if they come out easy and no problem, I'll put them back in. If they don't, just throw them away. A lot of times you have to drill them out of there. Sometimes they just won't come loose. So I want to clean the face of this. Before I push it in, I haven't pushed it in all the way yet. I do want to push it in. You can push it in with a big pair of channel locks, a C-clamp, and a pad. I have a tool to do it. We're pushing them in. You do want to push it in all the way, though. Gotta clean this. Clean this really good. I don't know why I'm messing with it like that. That's why I don't push it all the way in, because then I don't have to worry about hitting the boot. Alright, let's clean the back of the tabs. Clean them off. They're not too bad, actually, the back of the tab. They were rusty. I'd file them, get the corrosion off with a file, and then do this, but these are just a little bit of surface and come right off. Crud out of there, brake dust and everything else. And of course, brake clean can look up 1,001 uses. One more time. Let that dry. I'm going to take this over to the wire wheel, file it, take it to the wire wheel, clean it up. We'll come back and we'll re-grease it, put it back together. Alright, show you this. Got it all cleaned out in behind where the hardware goes. This one's a rustier, more corroded than the other side, but not too bad. Seen a lot worse. But what I'm going to do is we're going to take brake grease. We're going to come in here behind where the hardware goes, and we're going to put a thin coat of brake grease. All this does is keep moisture out, keep corrosion from starting behind the hardware and pushing in on the hardware and pinching the pad. Doesn't take very much to do it, but you definitely want to do it. It makes a difference. And this is brake grease. Can't be regular grease. Has to be brake grease to handle the temperatures. I use this is Permatex Ceramic Extreme. I use that for metal to metal, and I use Permatex Silicone brake grease for boots, for where it touches rubber. Sometimes they say certain manufacturers the rubber has a problem with this particular grease. I've never seen it, but I've heard it, so I don't use the same grease. But you can just use brake grease, Sil-Glide, silicone grease, silicone paste. Alright. So you can see the difference here. This one's wider than this one, so they are directional on the bracket. The other one was put in backwards. I don't know why, but it was. So we want to make sure that the wide side goes to the wide side on the bracket. So what I like to do with these, there's a couple little tabs on the inside here. I just hold this down, and then I push in the corner on that tab a little bit, and that kind of locks it in place so it won't move. On this set, something different, but same thing on this side. I don't know if you're seeing any of this because, man, my lighting skills are terrible today. I'm trying to show this to you, but at the same time, getting in the way all the time. So just push those corners in a little bit. That holds it in place. So that's in there like it should be. Narrow side to narrow of the bracket, wide side to wide side of the bracket. That's about all I can do with that right now because I have to get the boots for this. There's a groove in here that holds that boot. I went in there with a pick when I was cleaning it out, when I was cleaning these, and went in there and got any corrosion that might have been in there. I just scraped it out and then, you know, brake cleaned it all out. I'll set that aside for now. Same with this. Face of the piston. Grease the face of the piston. Hopefully you can see that. I think you can. Move it over so you can see it. So on the metal part, same thing with the back of these tabs. That rides in the back of the outside pad. Alright. Also helps to reduce noise a little bit. Okay, I'll just set that back there. I just use high temp grease for the face of this hub. These are fully coated rotors, so I don't really have a problem with sticking to the face, although I still, around this flange, and I still will put a thin coat on the whole thing. It doesn't hurt. If you have rotors that don't have a full coating or not electrostatically coated, these are fully coated. But if they're not, you definitely want to do this because that's where they tend to stick. They stick around this flange on the hub face. This just makes it easier for the next person who has to go in here. Chances of it sticking to this and corroding to it, a lot less, much less, if you just put a thin coat of high temp grease. It has to be high temp. Doesn't have to be brake grease, but it has to be high temp grease. Although it can be brake grease. So I don't want to, if you're just getting a little bit of brake grease to do your brakes, brake grease will work fine for this. It'll take the temperature. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit of brake grease down into the, not a lot, just going to kind of take my brush, put a thin coat on each side of these before I do anything. Put my boot in place. I believe it's this way. We'll see. Just try to show it to you. Try to get my hand out of the light here. We'll know in a second. I don't have it in there all the way yet. Come on. Still not in there. Still not in there right. There we go. In there, flush up against it into the groove. We'll do that for both boots. Okay. Set that there for a second. Pins are right here. Clean my pins off. They're not greased, they're not corroded, but their grease on them's not too good. If they're corroded, you want to clean them off, get the corrosion off of them. It does not want to let go on this one. Come on. Wow. It's fighting me. Try to do this without sticking my screwdriver in my hand. Yeah, this one's got some corrosion. You can see the corrosion on the top of that. I'm going to go to the wire wheel. I'm going to clean that up. I don't want that in there. Alright, clean them all up. No corrosion now. Nice and clean. Same thing. Thin coat. Ah, that's hot. Just a thin coat, not a lot. If you put too much on these, it'll lock them up. So I just want a thin coat. It has to only go these replacements only go one way. That's interesting. When I push it down, you want to kind of grab it and peel it back a little bit and get the air out of it. Kind of burp it. Huh. I don't particularly like that. Although it slides down into there. That's... I don't like that. I don't like that setup. That's a little weird. That can't be right. It's got to go this way. Doesn't make any sense the other way. I don't like it. I don't like the fact that I can't put them in there before I'm making a mess here because I got grease out of everything. I can't really, I have to put them onto this before I put them in. I don't like that at all. Then I've got to get that down in there. Aftermarket stuff sometimes, I hate it sometimes, well most of the time, because of these kind of reasons. Let me, I have a screwdriver, let me get a screwdriver. There it is. I've got to get that down in that groove in the bracket. It's got to get in there or it's not going to stay put. I don't know why, and it will go in there, but that is weird. I don't think it'll go in there with the way the pin is, the way this is designed. That doesn't make sense to me. So, it's got to go the other way. I don't like it, but it's got to go the other way. Something should take 2 seconds, 3 hours later. Yeah, it's got to go this way. Has to, because it doesn't make any sense. This has a little groove on the inside you can't see, which will grab that top groove. And this, that's weird. That's weird the way that's set up. I don't particularly like that a lot, but that's the way it's set up. It's the only way it can go. So I'm going to pull it out again. I got to re-grease it because I took all the grease off of it. Interesting. Not a big fan of that, really. But appears that's the only way it can go. Get my rotor. If your screws come out, make sure when you put the rotor back in, you have these screw holes. Make sure you line them up. These doesn't matter because they're broken off in there already, so it doesn't really matter. So right down here on the bottom is the adjusting wheel for the parking brake. So I want to get this close. These are all the way in. There's no gap right here at this end and no gap at this end. I'm going to turn this and get it close so it doesn't have to move much. They're supposed to be self-adjusting, but this one's got to be wrong because it's all the way in, which means it's going to be really loose against the inside. We don't want it that loose. So we're going to adjust that. I'll show it to you after I get it adjusted. So if you look at this now, on this end you can see that it's opened up here and it's actually getting wider or longer. It's pushing the parking brake pads out towards the inside of the rotor. Just sit this on here. So it's pretty loose still. I want it closer than that. So what we'll do is we'll keep adjusting it. I'll adjust this till I can't basically get the rotor on there, and then I'll back it off a little bit. Adjusting the steering wheel more. Still pretty loose. I like them close. doing is spreading that adjuster out, making it longer, pushing the parking brake pads outward. So now I can't get it on there. They're far enough apart where I can't get it on there. That's where I want to start. And then what I'll do is I'll rotate it the other way. Rotate it up here. Till it's close. Come on. Grief here. I'm blocking my own light. I can't see what I'm doing. Let's try there. See if I haven't enough yet. Alright, so now I have just a little bit of drag on those inside parking brake pads. That's where I want it. I don't want it real tight where you can't churn it, but I want it just kind of a little bit of drag. That's close. That's exactly where I want it to be. So now we should be able to go back and finish putting this together. Put our mounting bracket back on. Get my bolts here. That's right in front of me. I am going to put a little Loctite on these. Top started, bottom started. Okay, there we go. Now I can put my pads. Wear indicator was on the top inside. Top inside, so it's going to go back on the top inside. Just the pads back in there. Okay. Come on. Not quite right. They should move pretty easily. This one's hanging up on me a little bit here. Of course. I don't know why, but it is. Not quite right here. Oh, the rotor's not all the way in. That should not be tight. It should be able to move pretty freely. Something's not quite right there. That's right. That's in there correctly. There we go. Didn't have it quite right. Same thing on the outside. Stick it in there at an angle. Started. Push it in. That's it. Make sure they're up against, make sure the rotor's all the way in, they're up against it. That's it. We're going to put the wheel back on. Well, it wouldn't be too cool, huh? Just slide my caliper back on here. I didn't push my piston in, did I? Man, I forgot. I got to push that piston all the way in. Right in there. Tool. I'm just going to finish pushing. It's almost all the way in, but not quite. If you don't push it all the way in, brand new pads, you're not going to get the pads on, which is what I just ran into because I forgot to do it. push it all the way in. Should go in easy. Should be pretty simple. You may want to check your master cylinder. Make sure it's not full right to the top before you push these back in. Otherwise, it could overflow the master cylinder, push it out of the master cylinder. You don't want that. So you might take a little bit out if you need to. This one's fine. Start our bolts back in here. This does have a hex on the inside. If you need to hold this with a wrench while you're tightening this, you can. Just snug these up. Don't kill them. They're not that big. Just snug them up. Alright, my battery ran out. I was trying to get my battery, but I snugged both of these up. I had to hold this bottom one on the inside. It was spinning it. It's good. Everybody's looking good. I'll put the wheel back on, obviously. But I'm going to bed these pads to the rotor, which means I'm going to take it out and drive it up to around 50, 60 miles an hour, and then kind of aggressively slow it down to not a complete stop, maybe 10 miles an hour. I'm going to do it once or twice and drive it, let it cool down a little bit, and I'll repeat that process maybe 8 or 10 times. Bed the pads to the rotor, and then you're good. Before you go somewhere, pump your brake pedal till it gets firm, or you get a scary moment. Well, that's it for this 2006 Honda Ridgeline rear brakes maintenance. Pads and rotors. Did have to do a boot kit because one of the boots on the passenger side had a hole in it, and you don't want to put that back on there. You always want to check your boots to make sure they're not cracked and have holes in them like that one did. Dry rotted. A couple things. Always replace the hardware. Always replace the slides. Always get any corrosion out from behind the slides. Grease behind the slides. There's always a big kind of argument about that. On top of the slides, behind the slides. I do behind the slides. Stainless steel hardware doesn't rust. It doesn't need grease. All the grease does on top of it, and at least in my opinion, which means nothing to anybody but me, is collect dirt and grime off the road and gum everything up. The grease behind the hardware is to keep the moisture out of there and keep corrosion from starting behind the pads or behind those hardware clips, the slides. Because generally what happens is corrosion gets behind them, squeezes them, pushes them in, and pinches the pad, the tab on the end of the pad, and that's what causes a problem. But not a hard job. Make sure you bed your pads, make sure you pump your brake pedal, and make sure it's firm before you drive, or you get a little bit of a scary moment. Real easy. I say real easy. It's pretty easy. There's your pads. That's what I use for pads. Raybestos Element 3, and there's your rotor that I use for these for the rear. Hopefully you can see that number. There it is. Trying to get it in the middle for you, out of the light. There you go. I switched to these not too long ago, fully coated rotor. For where I am, corrosion is the #1 enemy, and really you want to fight that as much as possible. And I find that these fully coated rotors, which means that they have, like, fronts have the vanes for ventilation and cooling, they're coated inside there as well. So they tend to last longer. They don't corrode nearly as bad. So when you bed the pads in them, when you go look at that, after you do that, you'll see where the pads are. It's taking that surface, taking that coating off, but everywhere else is coated. So they don't corrode nearly as quickly or nearly as bad. So if you had to do this for your car, I hope it helps you out. If you like the video, subscribe below. Thanks for watching.